I remember the exact moment I understood that Joseph Pistone was either the bravest man I'd ever met or completely insane. It was November 1981. FBI headquarters in Manhattan. Third-floor conference room with fluorescent lights humming overhead and stale coffee going cold in styrofoam cups. I was a junior analyst with the Organized Crime Division, 26 years old, fresh out of Quantico, assigned to help process the mountain of evidence coming out of what the Bureau was calling Operation Sunapple. The operation was over. After 6 years of the most dangerous undercover work in FBI history, we'd finally pulled our agent out. And that morning, we were sitting in a debriefing session, listening to him describe, in calm, matter-of-fact tones that made the horror of it somehow worse, what it had been like to live as a mobster for 6 years. Special Agent Joseph Pistone sat at the head of the conference table, looking tired but alert. He was 42 years old, average height, dark hair going gray at the temples, the kind of guy who could blend into any crowd and be forgotten 5 minutes later, which was exactly why he'd been so good at his job. For 6 years, from September 1976 to July 1981, Joseph Pistone had ceased to exist. In his place was Donnie Brasco, jewel thief, burglar, associate of the Bonanno crime family, trusted friend of Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero, a hitman who'd killed 26 people, and protege of Dominic's Sonny Black Napolitano, a captain who was being groomed for boss. Pistone had penetrated deeper into the Mafia than any law enforcement officer in history. He'd attended commission meetings. He'd witnessed murders. He'd participated in crimes, loan sharking, extortion, illegal gambling, selling stolen goods, all with FBI approval, all carefully documented, all building toward the biggest organized crime prosecution in American history. And he'd done it all while wearing a wire, memorizing conversations, recording license plates, gathering evidence that would eventually produce over 200 indictments and more than 100 convictions. But the detail that made my blood run cold, the moment that made me realize just how close we'd come to disaster, came about 40 minutes into the debriefing. One of the senior agents asked, "Joe, how close did you come to being made inducted as a full member of the Mafia, a status that required killing someone on orders to prove your loyalty and willingness to commit murder?" Pistone looked up from his coffee. His expression didn't change. "For months," he said quietly. "Maybe less. Sonny Black was pushing for it. He wanted me inducted into the family. I would have had to kill someone to prove myself. The Bureau pulled me out before it got to that point." The room went silent. For months. If the operation had gone 4 months longer, the FBI would have been in an impossible position. Either order their agent to commit murder or pull him out and blow 6 years of work and put a $500,000 contract on his head. "What would you have done?" someone asked. "If they'd given you a contract before we pulled you?" Pistone thought about it for a long moment. "I don't know," he finally said. "I really don't know. That was 20 years ago. I'm retired now. Living in Florida, occasionally consulting for law enforcement agencies that want to understand how the Mafia worked before RICO and cooperating witnesses tore it apart. But I still think about Joe Pistone, about the fact that he spent 6 years, living as someone else, lying to everyone around him every single day, befriending men who would have tortured him to death if they'd known the truth, risking his life in ways most people can't even imagine. And I think about Lefty Ruggiero, the hitman who treated Donnie Brasco like a son, who vouched for him, who protected him, who would have been killed for betrayal. This is their story. The story of the greatest undercover operation in FBI history. The story of how one man destroyed an entire crime family from the inside. And the story of the devastating human cost when the truth finally came out. My name is Richard Coleman. I worked for the FBI from 1980 to 2005, specializing in organized crime analysis. I had access to all the transcripts, all the surveillance reports, all the debriefings from Operation Sunapple. This is what really happened. The making of an undercover agent. Joseph Dominic Pistone was born on September 17, 1939, in Erie, Pennsylvania, to working-class Italian-American parents who had no connection whatsoever to organized crime. His father worked in a factory. His mother raised the kids. They were respectable, law-abiding, deeply Catholic. Exactly the kind of family that raised kids to become cops or priests or teachers, not mobsters. Joe grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, after his family moved there when he was young. He went to William Patterson University, graduated with a degree in sociology, got married to his high school sweetheart Maggie, had 3 daughters, and in 1969, at age 30, joined the FBI. At the time, the FBI was dominated by what agents called Hoover's boys, clean-cut, college-educated, white men in dark suits who investigated bank robberies, kidnappings, and Soviet spies. Organized crime was a major priority. J. Edgar Hoover had spent decades denying the Mafia even existed, and the Bureau's expertise in that area was minimal. Pistone started out doing routine work, background checks, surveillance, paperwork, but he had qualities that set him apart. First, he was Italian-American, which meant he could blend into Italian neighborhoods without raising suspicion. Second, he spoke enough Italian to get by in conversations with older immigrants. Third, and this was crucial, he had a natural talent for lying, not pathological lying, operational lying, the ability to create a false identity, maintain it under pressure, remember all the details of his cover story, and project absolute confidence even when scared out of his mind. In the early 1970s, the FBI started experimenting with long-term undercover operations targeting organized crime. They needed agents who could pass as criminals, who could think like criminals, who could earn the trust of men who killed people for looking at them wrong. They tested Pistone with a small operation, infiltrating a ring of truck hijackers operating out of New York and New Jersey. His cover was simple. He was a burglar looking to fence stolen goods. It worked perfectly. Pistone convinced the hijackers he was legitimate, gained their trust, gathered evidence, and helped the FBI make over 30 arrests. His supervisors were impressed. Pistone had the skill set for deep cover work. And in 1974, when the FBI started planning a major operation to infiltrate the Mafia families in New York, his name came up immediately. The operation was called Sun Apple. The goal was ambitious. Place an agent inside one of 5 families, gather evidence on our operations, identify their leadership structure, and build RICO cases that could take down entire organizations. No FBI agent had ever successfully infiltrated the Mafia at a high level before. The risks were enormous. If the cover was blown, the agent would be tortured and killed. And the operation could take years, maybe a decade, with no guarantee of success. Joe Pistone volunteered. In 1975, he began preparing. He grew his hair longer, stopped shaving as often, started dressing like a low-level criminal. Leather jackets, gold chains, expensive watches, the kind of flash that made you look like you had money but weren't smart enough to hide it. He created a complete backstory. Donnie Brasco, jewel thief and burglar from California, no family connections in New York, looking to expand his operations, skill with alarms and locks. The FBI created a paper trail to support the legend. Arrests that went nowhere, associates who would vouch for him, all informants or undercover agents, connections to criminal operations on the West Coast. And in September 1976, Joseph Pistone walked into a bar in Little Italy, introduced himself as Donnie Brasco, and began the most dangerous 6 years of his life. Year 1, breaking in. Getting into the Mafia isn't like applying for a job. You can't just walk up to a wise guy and say, "Hey, I want to join your organization." That's a good way to get killed as a suspected undercover cop or FBI informant. Instead, you have to hang around, be seen, demonstrate that you're not a threat, that you're a criminal yourself, that you can be useful. And you have to do it in a way that doesn't seem desperate or suspicious. Pistone spent the first year just being present. He'd go to bars and restaurants in Little Italy and the Bronx where mobsters were known to hang out. He'd play cards, drink, make small talk, drop casual hints that he was in the life, a burglar, a thief, someone who made money outside the law. At first, nobody cared. The Mafia wasn't recruiting. They had plenty of guys. Some random stranger claiming to be a jewel thief wasn't interesting. But Pistone was patient. He kept showing up, kept being friendly, kept demonstrating through small actions that he knew how the life worked. He never asked too many questions, never wrote anything down, never showed curiosity about things that weren't his business, always picked up the check, always had cash. Slowly, Over months, people started to notice him. One of the first was Anthony Mira, a soldier in the Bonanno crime family. Mira was a violent, paranoid cocaine addict, exactly the kind of guy the FBI would normally avoid. But he was also connected, and he was looking for guys who could earn. Mira started talking to Donnie, feeling him out, asking what he did, where he was from, who he knew. Pistone fed him the cover story bit by bit. California, burglary, jewel theft, looking to expand operations in New York. Mira was suspicious. He was always suspicious. But he was also greedy. If this guy, Donnie, could really crack safes and steal jewelry, that was money. In early 1977, Mira introduced Pistone to a crew of guys involved in hijacking trucks from JFK Airport. Stolen cargo, electronics, clothing, whatever, was fenced through mob-connected warehouses and sold at a fraction of retail price. It was a classic racket, low risk and profitable. Pistone started helping them move stolen goods. The FBI approved it. They needed him to establish credibility. Every transaction was carefully documented. Every item was recovered after the fact when possible. But Pistone was committing crimes, with full knowledge and approval of his superiors, to maintain his cover. It was working. By mid-1977, Pistone was a known associate of the Bonanno family. Not important, not trusted with anything serious, but known, present, part of the landscape. And then he met the man who would change everything. Benjamin Lefty Guns Ruggiero. Lefty, the hitman and the surrogate father. Benjamin Ruggiero was born in 1926 in the Bronx, the son of Italian immigrants, and had been a member of the Bonanno crime family since the 1950s. They called him Lefty because he was left-handed. They called him Lefty Guns because he killed 26 people, or at least that's what he claimed, and nobody doubted it. By the time Pistone met him in 1977, Lefty was 51 years old, a soldier in the Bonanno family, and frustrated. He'd been in the life for 30 years, killed for family, earned for family, done everything he was supposed to do, but he'd never been promoted to captain, never got the respect he thought he deserved, never made the money the higher-ups made. He was broke, basically, gambling debts, bad investments, a lifestyle that cost more than he earned. He needed to make money, and he needed guys around him who could help him earn. When Anthony Mira introduced Lefty to Donnie Brasco in 1977, Lefty saw opportunity. This kid Donnie was young, mid-30s, which was young by mob standards, smart, skilled with burglary and theft, and most importantly, respectful. He didn't talk too much, didn't ask stupid questions, seemed to understand how things worked. Lefty started bringing Donnie around, introduced him to other guys, brought him to social clubs where Bonanno family members hung out, vouched for him, and Pistone played his role perfectly. He was deferential to Lefty, always asking for advice, always treating him with the respect that a younger associate should show to a made man. He listened to Lefty's stories about the old days, about hits he'd done, about the way the Mafia used to be before everything got complicated. Lefty ate it up. This kid Donnie reminded him of himself when he was younger, hungry, ambitious, willing to do what it took. Over months, their relationship deepened. Lefty started treating Donnie like a son, or at least like a younger brother he was mentoring. He taught him the rules of the life. Never rat. No matter what, you never cooperate with law enforcement. You go to prison. You keep your mouth shut. That's the most important rule. Respect the hierarchy. Made men are above associates. Captains are above soldiers. The boss is above everyone. You disrespect the hierarchy, you get killed. Earn. That's your job. Make money. Kick it upstairs to your superiors. Keep some for yourself. If you're not earning, you're useless. Never ask about things that aren't your business. If someone wants you to know something, they'll tell you. Pistone absorbed it all, memorized every detail, reported everything back to his FBI handlers during brief, secretive meetings in parking garages and hotel rooms. By 1978, Lefty trusted Donnie enough to bring him into more serious operations. They ran a loan-sharking business together, lending money at usurious rates and collecting, sometimes violently, when borrowers couldn't pay. They sold stolen property. They extorted businesses. And through it all, Pistone gathered evidence, names, dates, amounts, descriptions of crimes. He couldn't wear a wire constantly. Too dangerous. Too easy to be discovered during a pat-down. But he had recording devices hidden in his apartment and car for when he could safely use them. Mostly, he relied on his memory, writing detailed reports after meetings and reconstructing conversations word for word. The FBI was ecstatic. They were getting intelligence on the Bonanno family's operations that they'd never had before. The structure of the family, who reported to whom, how money flowed up the chain, how decisions were made. But there was a problem developing, one that would plague the operation for years. Joseph Pistone was disappearing into Donnie Brasco, the man who lived a lie. Living undercover for 6 years does things to a person. You can't just be Joe Pistone from 9 to 5 and Donnie Brasco after hours. When you're deep undercover, you're that person all the time. You eat as him, sleep as him, think as him. Your family becomes distant. Your real life becomes a dream, and the false identity becomes more real than your actual self. Pistone's marriage was falling apart. He was almost never home. When he was home, he couldn't talk about his work. Operational security forbade it. His wife Maggie knew he was doing something dangerous to the Bureau, but she didn't know the details, didn't know how deep he was, didn't know that her husband was spending 16 hours a day with murderers who treated him like family. His 3 daughters barely knew him. He missed birthdays, missed school events, was physically present maybe 2 or 3 days a month, and even then mentally absent, always thinking about the operation, about maintaining his cover, about not making a mistake that would get him killed. And there was another problem. Pistone was starting to like parts of the life, not the violence, not the criminality, but the camaraderie, the sense of belonging to something. The respect he got as Donnie Brasco in a way that Joseph Pistone, mid-level FBI agent, never experienced. When he walked into a room as Donnie, people noticed. Lefty treated him like family. Sonny Black, the captain, valued his opinion. Other wise guys nodded with respect. It was intoxicating and dangerous. FBI psychologists who debriefed agents after long undercover operations had a term for it: going native. When the undercover identity starts feeling more real, more comfortable, more rewarding than your actual life. Pistone wasn't going native. He never lost sight of who he really was or what his mission was. But he was close. Close enough that his handlers started worrying. Close enough that they scheduled regular psychological evaluations to make sure he was still fit for duty. But they kept him in place, because the intelligence he was providing was too valuable to lose. By 1979, Pistone had risen to become one of Lefty's most trusted associates, and he was about to get access to the upper levels of the Bonanno family. Sonny Black and the path to power. Dominic Sonny Black, Napolitano, was everything Lefty Ruggiero wasn't. Where Lefty was a soldier who'd never been promoted, Sonny Black was a captain on his way to becoming boss. Where Lefty was broke and scrambling to earn, Sonny Black controlled profitable rackets and had money. Where Lefty was emotional and hot-tempered, Sonny Black was calm, strategic, calculating. He'd earned his nickname from his jet black hair, which he dyed to hide the gray. He was vain, ambitious, smart, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. In 1978, when Anthony Mira went to prison on drug trafficking charges, Lefty saw an opportunity. Mira had been Donnie's original sponsor in the family, but Lefty wanted Donnie for himself. He approached Sonny Black and proposed that Donnie operate exclusively under Lefty's supervision. Sonny Black agreed, but he wanted to meet this Donnie Brasco kid first, see if he was worth the trouble. The meeting happened at a social club in Brooklyn. Pistone walked in knowing this was one of the most important moments of the operation. Sonny Black was a captain, high up in the family hierarchy. If he accepted Donnie, doors would open that had been closed before. Pistone played it perfectly. Respectful, but not obsequious. Confident, but not arrogant. He answered Sonny Black's questions carefully, gave just enough detail to seem legitimate without over-explaining, demonstrated that he understood the rules and respected the hierarchy. Sonny Black was impressed. This kid Donnie had potential. He was a good earner. He was smart, and most importantly, Lefty vouched for him completely. "You're with me now," Sonny Black told Donnie. Lefty's your direct supervisor, but you both answer to me. You do good work. There's opportunities. Opportunities. In Mafia speak, that meant the possibility of being made inducted as a full member of the family. It was exactly what the FBI wanted, and exactly what would create the operation's biggest crisis. From 1978 onward, Pistone worked directly under Sonny Black's supervision. He attended meetings with captains and made men. He participated in family business, not just street-level crimes, but discussions about strategy, territory, conflicts with other families. The intelligence he gathered was staggering. He learned about the structure of the commission, the governing body representing all 5 families. He identified conflicts within the Bonanno family between factions led by different captains. He discovered that Sicilian immigrants called Zips were running a massive heroin importation operation through pizza restaurants across New York and Pennsylvania. That last piece of intelligence led to the Pizza Connection case, a separate FBI investigation that would eventually result in dozens of arrests and convict the leadership of one of the largest heroin trafficking networks in American history. But the deeper Pistone went, the more dangerous it became. In 1980, Sonny Black opened a nightclub in Florida called the King's Court. The club was actually an FBI front operation designed to attract mobsters in Florida and gather intelligence. But Sonny Black didn't know that. He thought it was a legitimate investment opportunity that Donnie had brought to him. Pistone convinced Sonny Black to become a partner in the club, and suddenly the FBI had access to conversations involving not just the Bonanno family, but mobsters from all over the country who visited the club. It was an intelligence goldmine, and it put Pistone closer to the center of power than ever before. But it also put him in more danger than ever before. The sit-down when death came knocking. In 1981, Anthony Mira was released from prison, and he was furious. Mira had originally brought Donnie Brasco into the family back in 1977. But while Mira was in prison, Lefty had taken Donnie away and was now earning money with him under Sonny Black's supervision. From Mira's perspective, that was a violation. Donnie was his guy, and Lefty had stolen him. Mira started making accusations, spreading rumors, suggesting that maybe this Donnie Brasco guy wasn't who he claimed to be. Maybe he was too good to be true. Maybe he was a rat. This was the nightmare scenario the FBI had feared from the beginning. If the Bonanno family started seriously investigating Donnie's background, the operation was over, and Pistone would be dead. Sonny Black called a sit-down, a formal meeting to resolve the dispute. Mira, Lefty, Sonny Black, and Donnie would all attend. They'd hear both sides, and Sonny Black would make a ruling. Pistone knew that if Mira's accusations gained any traction, if anyone at that sit-down started really questioning his identity, he was finished. His cover story was good, but it wouldn't stand up to serious investigation. And once they suspected he was FBI, they'd kill him immediately, probably torture him first to find out what he'd told the Bureau, then kill him and dump his body somewhere it would never be found. The sit-down happened in a private room in a restaurant in Little Italy. Pistone walked in trying to project absolute confidence. Mira was there, angry and paranoid. Lefty was there, defensive, ready to vouch for Donnie no matter what. Sonny Black sat at the head of the table, calm and cold, ready to make a decision. Mira made his case. Donnie was too smooth, too lucky, too good at avoiding problems. Maybe he was a cop. Maybe he was FBI. They should check him out more carefully. Make sure he was really who he said he was. Lefty exploded, called Mira paranoid, said Donnie had proved himself over and over for 4 years, said Mira was just jealous that Donnie was earning money with someone else. Then Sonny Black turned to Pistone. You got anything to say, Donnie? Pistone looked Mira in the eye. I'm here. I do what I'm told. I earn. If you got a problem with that, that's your problem. But I ain't no rat. Simple, direct, no defensiveness. Just a flat statement of fact, delivered with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from telling the truth. Even though, of course, Donnie Brasco was lying about literally everything. Sonny Black studied Pistone for a long moment. Then he turned to Mira. You got proof he's a rat? No, but... Then shut the fuck up. Donnie's with us. He's earning, he's doing good work, and Lefty vouches for him. That's the end of it. Mira glared at Pistone with pure hatred, but he nodded. Sonny Black had ruled. The matter was settled. Pistone walked out of that sit-down, knowing he'd just survived one of the closest calls of his life. But he also knew he'd made a serious enemy in Anthony Mira. And in the Mafia, enemies didn't forget. The FBI started seriously considering pulling him out. The operation had been running for almost 5 years. They had mountains of evidence. They'd identified the entire structure of the Bonanno family. They'd gathered intelligence on drug trafficking, loan sharking, extortion, murder. How much longer could they risk their agent's life? But Pistone convinced his supervisors to let him stay, because Sonny Black had started talking about something that would take the operation to a level no FBI agent had ever reached before. Sonny Black wanted Donnie Brasco to become a made man, the ultimate test, becoming made. In the Mafia, being made is everything. Associates can earn with the family, can participate in crimes, can even get rich. But they're not really part of the organization. They can be killed without permission from the boss. They can't attend certain meetings. They don't have a vote in family decisions. Made men are different. They're formal members of La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours. They are protected. Killing a made man requires approval from a boss, and sometimes from the commission. They have status, respect, power. But becoming made requires 2 things. First, you have to be Italian. No exceptions. The Mafia is an Italian organization, and only men of Italian descent can be inducted. Second, you have to kill someone on orders from a family. You have to prove that you're willing to commit murder, that you can be trusted with a family's most serious business, that you'll never cooperate with law enforcement, because you're guilty of the ultimate crime. Joseph Pistone was Italian. That part was covered. But the murder requirement was a problem. By 1981, Sonny Black was rising in the Bonanno family. There was talk that he might become acting boss, and he wanted to bring Donnie Brasco in as a made man, partly because he valued Donnie, partly because having a made man who was personally loyal to him would strengthen Sonny Black's position. He started putting in the paperwork with the family's leadership, vouching for Donnie, explaining why he should be made, and the family's leadership agreed. Donnie Brasco had earned it. He'd been with them for 5 years. He'd made money. He'd proved himself loyal. He was ready to be made. There was just one requirement. He had to do a piece of work first. A hit. Kill someone the family wanted dead. In early 1981, Sonny Black told Pistone he'd be getting a contract soon. Someone in Florida who'd cause problems for the family. Donnie would be sent to kill him as proof that he was ready for membership. Pistone reported this to his FBI handlers, and the Bureau went into crisis mode. They could not allow their agent to commit murder. That was a line they absolutely would not cross. But if Pistone refused a contract, his cover would be blown instantly. No legitimate mobster would turn down an order to kill someone. The FBI came up with a plan. They'd identify the target, kidnap him, fake his death, and tell the Mafia that Donnie had completed the hit. It was risky. If the Mafia investigated and discovered the target was still alive, Pistone was dead, but it was the only option. There was just one problem. The FBI couldn't locate the target. They tried. They searched Florida. They put out alerts. But the guy had disappeared. Maybe he'd heard rumors and gone into hiding. Maybe he left the state. Maybe he was already dead. They couldn't find him, which meant they couldn't fake his death, which meant Pistone was going to be ordered to kill someone, and he'd have no way to fake compliance. The FBI made the decision. Pull Pistone out. The operation was over. On July 26, 1981, after nearly 6 years undercover, Joseph Pistone was extracted from the Bonanno family. He disappeared. One day, he was Donnie Brasco. The next day, he was gone. And the Bonanno family realized they'd been infiltrated by the FBI. The aftermath, blood and betrayal. The moment the Bonanno family realized Donnie Brasco was an FBI agent, they knew what it meant. Every crime they committed in his presence was evidence. Every conversation was potential testimony. Every meeting, every deal, every operation, all of it had been recorded, documented, reported to the FBI. They'd been compromised at the highest levels, and someone would have to pay. The first target was Sonny Black. Dominic Sonny Black, Napolitano had vouched for Donnie Brasco, had brought him into the family's inner circle, had proposed making him a full member, and that meant Sonny Black was responsible for the disaster. On August 17, 1981, 3 weeks after Pistone's extraction, Sonny Black was called to a meeting. He knew what it meant. In the Mafia, when you're called to a meeting after something goes wrong, you're probably going to be killed. Sonny Black went anyway, because in the life, you don't run. You face what's coming. His body was discovered in a creek in Staten Island months later. He'd been shot multiple times. His hands had been cut off, a Mafia message indicating he'd brought in an outsider who betrayed the family. Lefty Ruggiero, the hitman who treated Donnie like a son, was also targeted. But Lefty got lucky. The FBI arrested him before the Bonanno family could kill him. He was charged with racketeering based on evidence Pistone had gathered, convicted, and sent to federal prison for 15 years. He spent his time in prison telling anyone who'd listened that Donnie Brasco had been a good kid, a stand-up guy, someone he'd trusted completely. The betrayal broke something in him. He died in 1994, shortly after being released, still believing that somehow he should have seen it coming. Anthony Mira, the paranoid soldier who'd first brought Donnie into the family and who'd later accused him of being a rat, was also killed, shot multiple times, and left in a garage in Manhattan. Whether he was killed for bringing in a rat or for failing to identify the rat earlier, nobody knows for sure. The Bonanno family was decimated. The commission, the governing body of the 5 families, was so embarrassed by the infiltration that they suspended the Bonanno family from membership for several years. It was a humiliation unprecedented in Mafia history. And Joseph Pistone? He went into hiding with a $500,000 contract on his head. The trial and the testimony. Between 1982 and 1988, Joseph Pistone testified in multiple trials, providing evidence that resulted in over 200 indictments and more than 100 convictions. He testified in the Pizza Connection case, which convicted Sicilian mobsters running heroin through pizza restaurants. He testified in the Mafia Commission trial, which convicted the leadership of multiple families. He testified in dozens of smaller cases targeting Bonanno family members and associates. Every time he took the stand, he was surrounded by U.S. Marshals. Every time he left the courthouse, he was moved to a different safe location. The mob wanted him dead, and they had the resources to make it happen if they could find him. But they never did. Pistone lived in witness protection for years, moving constantly, using different identities, never staying in one place long enough to be tracked. In 1986, he retired from the FBI. In 1988, he published a book about his experiences, Donnie Brasco, My Undercover Life in the Mafia, which became a bestseller. In 1997, the book was adapted into a film starring Johnny Depp as Pistone and Al Pacino as Lefty Ruggiero. The contract on his life remained in effect. As of today, there's still officially a $500,000 bounty for information leading to Joseph Pistone's location. He's in his 80s now, still alive, still in hiding, still looking over his shoulder 40 years after the operation ended. The cost of the truth. I think about Lefty Ruggiero sometimes. 26 murders, 30 years in the Mafia, a lifetime of violence and crime. And in the end, what broke him wasn't prison or old age or guilt over the people he'd killed. It was a betrayal. The realization that Donnie Brasco, the kid he'd mentored, the young guy he'd treated like a son, the person he'd vouched for and protected and believed in, was an FBI agent who'd been lying to him every single day for 5 years. Pistone said in interviews that Lefty never really understood it, never could reconcile the person he'd known, Donnie, the stand-up guy who earned money and showed respect and seemed to genuinely care about him, with the reality that it had all been an act. He was a good kid. Lefty kept saying, even after he knew the truth, Donnie was a good kid. That's what makes the story so tragic, because in a weird way, Lefty was right. Pistone had to care about Lefty to pull off the act convincingly. He had to genuinely listen to Lefty's stories, genuinely laugh at his jokes, genuinely show concern when Lefty had money problems. You can't fake that level of intimacy for 5 years. Not convincingly. So Pistone, in some sense, did care about Lefty. And then he destroyed him anyway, because that was the job. Operation Sun Apple was the most successful undercover operation in FBI history. It produced hundreds of indictments, destroyed the Bonanno family's leadership, provided unprecedented intelligence on Mafia operations, and proved that even the most secretive criminal organizations could be infiltrated. But the human cost was staggering. Joseph Pistone's marriage fell apart. His relationship with his daughters was damaged in ways that took decades to repair. He lived in constant fear for years. He can never live a normal life. Even now, 40 years later, he has to maintain security, has to watch for threats, has to live with the knowledge that the Mafia still wants him dead. Sonny Black was murdered. Lefty died broken and bitter. Dozens of Bonanno family members went to prison. Families were destroyed. Lives were ruined. Was it worth it? From a law enforcement perspective, absolutely. The operation fundamentally changed how the FBI approached organized crime. It proved RICO prosecutions could work. It established protocols for deep undercover work that are still used today. But from a human perspective, I don't know. I met Joe Pistone twice during my time with the Bureau. Both times he seemed tired. Not physically. He was in good shape for his age, but spiritually tired. Like he'd given everything he had to the job and wasn't sure it had been enough. I did what I had to do, he told me once. I don't regret it, but I think about those guys sometimes. Lefty, Sonny, guys who trusted me. And I wonder if they understood at the end why I did it. I don't think they did. I don't think they could, because in their world, loyalty was everything. And Pistone or Donnie Brasco or whatever we call him violated that loyalty in the most complete way imaginable. He didn't just betray them. He never was them in the first place. The man they trusted didn't exist. And that's the real horror of deep undercover work. Not the danger, not the violence, but the fundamental dishonesty of it. The fact that you build relationships, real relationships, with real emotional connections, and then you destroy the people you connected with. Pistone lived that nightmare for 6 years. And in some ways, I think he's still living it. The legacy. Today, the Bonanno crime family still exists, but it's a shadow of what was before Operation Sun Apple. The FBI still runs undercover operations against organized crime, but nothing on the scale of what Pistone did. The risks are too high. The psychological toll is too severe. And modern surveillance technology, wiretaps, GPS tracking, financial monitoring, makes long-term infiltration less necessary. Joseph Pistone is remembered as a hero in law enforcement circles. His testimony helped dismantle one of the most powerful crime families in America. His courage and dedication set a standard that few agents will ever match. But he's also remembered as the man who destroyed the code that held the Mafia together for 100 years. After Operation Sun Apple, the Mafia never fully trusted anyone again. Paranoia became the default. Relationships became transactional. The old code of loyalty and honor, already corrupted by greed and violence, eroded completely, and cooperating with the FBI became thinkable in a way it never had been before. If Donnie Brasco could fool the Bonanno family for 6 years, how could you trust anyone? And if you couldn't trust anyone, why not make a deal to save yourself? The flood of cooperating witnesses that destroyed the Mafia in the 1990s and 2000s, guys like Sammy Gravano, Michael Franzese, Henry Hill, all of them were influenced directly or indirectly by what Pistone had proved was possible. You could betray the life, and you could survive. That's Joe Pistone's real legacy. Not just the prosecutions or the convictions, but the proof that the Mafia's greatest strength, the code of omerta, the guarantee that nobody would ever cooperate, was a lie. Because if one FBI agent could infiltrate them, if one man could fool them for 6 years, then the whole system was vulnerable. And once they understood that, it was only a matter of time before the whole thing collapsed. Epilogue: The man who never was. I'm 78 years old now, retired, living in a small town in Florida that I won't name for reasons that should be obvious. Every year or so, I get a call from a reporter or a documentary filmmaker asking if I'll talk about Operation Sun Apple, about Joe Pistone, about what it was like to process the evidence and watch the trials unfold. I usually say no, but sometimes I think about saying yes, about trying to explain what it meant to witness the greatest undercover operation in FBI history from the inside. Because here's what nobody understands unless they were there. Joseph Pistone didn't just infiltrate the Mafia. He became, for 6 years, a better mobster than most actual mobsters. He earned more money than guys who'd been in the life for 20 years. He gained the trust of killers who trusted almost nobody. He navigated the complex politics of a crime family better than soldiers who'd grown up in that world. And he did it while secretly serving the FBI, while gathering evidence, while living a double life that would have destroyed most people psychologically. That's not just courage. That's not just acting ability. That's a kind of dedication or obsession that most people can't comprehend. Joseph Pistone gave 6 years of his life to destroy the Bonanno crime family. He sacrificed his marriage, his relationship with his children, his safety, his future, everything. And he succeeded. The question that keeps me up at night, 40 years later, is whether it was worth what it cost him. I don't know if even he knows the answer to that. But I know this. Donnie Brasco was the greatest role an FBI agent ever played. And Joseph Pistone paid for that performance in ways most people will never understand. The man who lived as someone else for 6 years. The agent who fooled the Mafia. The ghost in the machine. That's the legacy of Joseph Pistone. And it's a legacy written in blood, betrayal, and the rubble of a criminal empire that never saw him coming.